It's time for Forward Nation Radio. Now here he is, the host of Forward Nation Radio, David Leventhal.
Exciting news this week. Spiderman is real. He exists. Only apparently he exists in France, where he scaled the side of a building to rescue a 4-year-old boy hanging from a balcony. Mon Dieu. Yeah, he's French. Not only is he French, it turns out when he took his mask off, he's black. Not only is he French and black, turns out he is an immigrant from Africa, no less. Inspiring France and saving a 4-year-old boy. Seriously? Why do they get all the good immigrants? Curse you, Stan Lee. Anyway, welcome to a special entertainment edition of Forward Nation Radio, inspired by the Spider-Man story, with me, David Leventhal. On today's special entertainment edition of the show, we'll start off with sports news, then TV, bet you can't guess where that one's going, and a little bit of Russian roulette. Starting right out with the sports news. You may be excited to already have heard that it was Mayor Rudy Giuliani's, former Mayor Giuliani's birthday, and he celebrated by going to Yankee Stadium, where he expected a hero's welcome, of course, having previously tried to give the owners of the New York Yankees $1 billion of public money for their stadium. And it turns out his honor was supposedly roundly booed at Yankee Stadium. At least that's the fake media narrative. They weren't booing. As Rudy could tell you, they were saying, "Roo, roo, roo, roo," in honor of Rudy Giuliani. Clearly, they were not saying, "Jew, Jew, Jew," because they were at Yankee Stadium, not a Trump campaign rally. Also in the news this week, the NFL rules against kneeling by players during the national anthem. Striking a huge blow for patriotism, and not a huge one for speech. My first reaction to this story, and second and third reaction, was basically, oh, who gives a crap? Look, let's be clear. The NFL is a private business. Their interests are to make money. Beyond that, their interests are to make more money, and then more money, and more money. What else do they care about? American values, patriotism, the flag, pickup trucks? No, they don't care about any of those things other than what gets them more money. And we should keep that in mind. They are not obligated to respect speech because they are not the government. But then again, as I think about this story, we give them billions of dollars for their stadiums. Whatever stadiums those players might want to protest in, it's a pretty safe bet that it has millions or billions of dollars of public money to be built. They get an antitrust exemption from our government, so they don't have to operate like a normal business and face competition. They get all kinds of special privileges under the laws, tax laws, etc., to remain where they are, to move someplace else. And with all those ties to government, we can't say that maybe you are bound by some constitutional provisions. There's maybe some almost good news in this story. Football players have a lot of money. NFL football players have a lot of money. And for once, wealthy people are being told that they have the same free speech rights as the rest of us, which is basically you can go to a private, quiet room all by yourself and talk all you want. Of course, before we take heart in that, we should realize that the NFL players aren't exactly the wealthy people that the powers that be really like. They don't hang out at the same clubs, unless they're fighting there, I guess. In international sports news, we've got, all right, this is going to be a bit of a stretch, but we've got the latest on China sanctions. By sports, I'd have roulette, but we don't have a roulette table. So we're going to play Magic 8 Ball. Why bother? Seriously? Whenever we do this show, you're going to be watching it at some other time. So whatever I tell you is the current status of trade sanctions on China, by the time you are watching or listening to this show, that will be old news about 6 times over. Right now, as we speak, I think, Damien, am I still on the latest? The trade sanctions are back on? I think the sanctions are back on today.
I think you have to roll a ball and see where it lands with
Maybe I need to do the Magic 8 Ball. Are trade sanctions on or not? Forward Nation Radio. Okay, that works. There you go. Magic 8 Ball. I used to think that the whole China thing was the president basically investing money in the stock market with his friends. He knows he'd whisper something about China and the stock market would either tank or go up based on what he said, so I figured he was just trading ahead of whatever idiocy he said. But that's probably giving him too much credit. And at this point, I don't think it really matters, because I think the stock market now reacts to things that Trump says with a, wait, what? Why bother? Because it's not going to be the news an hour from now. The same thing, of course, applies to our meetings with North Korea. Because there's one thing about the United States government, you always want to keep them guessing. You never want them to know where you're heading. Are we meeting with North Korea or aren't we? Oh, I don't know. But I do know that we've sent envoys to meet with North Korean envoys to talk about what might happen in the meeting. Wow, what an idea. Why didn't somebody think of that before? Oh, right, of course, everybody has thought of that before, just nobody in the Trump administration had thought of that before. My question, of course, is as we send these diplomats to go negotiate pre-meeting, we have diplomats left? Who's doing this? Anyway, moving on to TV news. Gee, Damien, are you excited for the next season of Roseanne? Oh, crud. I don't want to engage in schadenfreude here. I don't know Roseanne. Interestingly, I was listening to a Bill Maher episode, Real Time with Bill Maher recently, and he talked about Roseanne. And he said, Roseanne, I've always known you, you've been a friend, and you've always been a liberal. I couldn't believe it. What's going on with you now? He asked. So I don't know what Roseanne is like. Although, after this truly revolting tweet, it turns out that she's had a bunch of tweets just like this. And it turns out she's probably a bit of a, racist, maybe some other things as well. But I don't know, because in some respects, the alternative may be worse. Because Roseanne ultimately is a performer. She knows how to perform in front of an audience. And the sad part of this story may be the extent to which she believes and how she believes she needs to perform for her particular audience. It's also in that apparently tweet tirade that was so awful, so blatantly racist. She also called George Soros a Nazi. Now, George Soros, of course, is the bête noire of the right. He funds things like education and information and intelligence. Liberal stuff. So the right hates him. But calling him a Nazi, we've speculated on this show. If you march arm in arm with Nazis, actual Nazis, if your leader, the President of the United States, cannot come out and condemn Nazis and has to kind of say nice things about them, if they are the ones screaming the loudest at our president's rallies, do you really still get to call the other side Nazis whenever they do something you don't like? And of course, the answer should be, no, that's ridiculous. Except if the other side is a bunch of people who watch Fox News, you could do whatever the hell you want. The fact that it doesn't make any sense, it's stupid, it's ridiculous, it's embarrassingly hypocritical, who cares? Because they'll believe anything. So the question now, of course, is how do Trump supporters respond to the Roseanne imbroglio? You know, I like the tables turned here. You know, whenever a black person says something off color, you know how Fox News and the Republicans are always up in arms about every person who's ever voted Democratic needs to come out and say it's an awful thing and condemn it and whatever, right? Because they're apparently speaking for all of us when they do that. Well, is that the case here? Again, I don't want to get into the whole hypocrite thing. How are Trump's supporters going to respond to this? Are they going to say this is disgusting? This is disgraceful? You know how the right calls upon Muslims to all come out publicly and self-flagellate every time ISIS does something bad? Are we going to see the Republicans now coming out and doing the same thing with Roseanne? Of course we're not, because we don't play by the same rules. One of the stories that's come out of this positively is the extent to which Trump apparently has emboldened closet racists to come out of the closet and apparently make room for the homosexuals they want to put back in. But they can get the racists, the homophobes, whatever, out of the closet. It seems awful, but maybe that's a good thing. You know, if the cockroaches come out in the light, they're easier to squash. Now, for those of you watching on the other side who don't understand the concept of irony or metaphors, I'm not saying we should kill these people or squash these people in any way, shape, or form, other than, metaphorically speaking, crush their beliefs, crush their racism, crush their homophobia, crush whatever bigotry they now have. Maybe if it's out in the open, it will be easier to address it and stamp it out. Assuming, of course, that the majority of us prove to want to stamp it out. And that's a big concern here for some of us. Maybe it's not just a few closet cases. Let's hope that what we're not learning is the extent to which Americans are this bigoted. We take great hope, I guess, from ABC's quick action. The backlash, at least with regard to her career, to what she has done. Again, ABC didn't do this because what she said was abhorrent and repugnant, as they just properly described it. They did this because they felt that they had to, money-wise, financially. Let's hope they're right. And that's the good news. And when this comes out, we can address this once and for all. We've also gotten a taste in the Roseanne imbroglio of, once again, this false equivalency that angers all of us at FNR so much. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm speaking for you right now. Wait until you hear what I have to say. You know, all you keep hearing from all these people, even people on the left, we've become so tribal. That's the thing. We've become so tribal. This country is so tribal. We keep saying this, and I'm going to say it again. I want to scream at the TV every time I hear this. Excuse me, but liberals aren't watching Fox News. The left isn't watching made-up news. We haven't invented alternative facts. We're not supporting racists. We're not attacking science, reason, education. It's only one side. And let's address that. To the extent that the left is tribal, it's because the other side is putting us in a tribe so they can attack us. Oh, that reminds me. In the wake of the Roseanne scandal, I guess it's time for the Democrats to get another lecture on identity politics. Right, because that term's not ridiculously offensive and shown to be offensive in this light. Right. Why do Democrats always talk about black people as not being the same as white people? I don't know. Conservatives are so good at treating them the same. The police are so good at treating them the same. Why do Democrats keep insisting on pointing out their differences? I guess Democrats will continue to focus on identity as long as the other side makes identity as important as it is. When you're attacked for being black or homosexual, maybe you defend yourself on the basis of being black or homosexual. But the media narrative is always, let's be fair to both sides, the thinking, educated people and the lunatics. Once again, looking at this, we talked a couple of times on this show. We had a long show some time back. If you missed it, go back and take a look at our show on affirmative action, which is newly relevant. Affirmative action, which we argued, society needs to start understanding that going through life black means that you face obstacles in your lifetime that white people do not face. And it is just fair that any potential employer or educator takes that into account when looking at your qualifications. That, of course, does not fly with at least 4 members of the United States Supreme Court, but it flies when confronted with reality, when looked at in reality. Because black people, women, other minorities go through this kind of shit, face this kind of racism, either overt or covert, every day of their lives. And we should stop pretending that it doesn't happen. And yet Chuck Grassley, of course, is begging Justice Kennedy to resign so that the criminal president can replace him, motivated in large part by the fact that they will get the 5th vote to end affirmative action. After all, we don't look at people based on race in this country. Anyway, moving on, the game's edition to Russia Roulette. We're going to start Russia edition. We're going to talk just briefly about a couple of the latest developments with Russia. That which just came out, that President Trump presses the Attorney General, or pressed the Attorney General some time ago, to take back his recusal. After all, with this president, there's nothing that can't be taken back. Promises, agreements, wedding vows, doesn't matter. It all comes back. But you know, pressing the Attorney General to take back his recusal, which was done under law, could potentially be, what's that word I'm looking for? The big O. Oh, obstruction. Yeah, could be. You know, it was reported in a credible study this week that 59% of Americans think that the Mueller investigation has not uncovered any evidence of crimes. I heard that statistic and I literally couldn't believe it. 59% of this country doesn't watch Fox News, but 59% say he's got 3 guilty pleas and more than a dozen indictments. Well, this might be another one. But also in that vein, Trump, of course, has ordered the Department of Justice to investigate the Department of Justice based on a claim that they were out to get him, which is supported by mounds and mounds and mounds of non-existent evidence. So much non-existent evidence it could fill a conference room at Fox News. There's nothing to support. That doesn't stop Trump from saying it. Remember, this is the FBI that made Trump the president by publicizing bullshit about Hillary and keeping everything about Trump under wraps. They're so secretive, they tried to uncover all this information about Trump just so they could keep it secret for the election. None of this makes sense. So does it make sense to the extent that Trey Gowdy, Mr. Benghazi, the guy who spent 4 years investigating bullshit when everybody knew it was bullshit just so he could keep the heat on Hillary Clinton, had to come out and say, well, yeah, there's really nothing wrong with this investigation. I have a running bet, is it now? I don't know. It's not a bet. I don't know what the word is. With our esteemed producer, Damian Hardeen, who says that he thinks this is a big deal. That Trey Gowdy, of all people, undermining the Trump argument of the deep state out to get him is a really big deal. I hope he's right. He usually is. I just don't think anything is a big deal anymore on the right. They'll believe whatever they're told to believe today. And if it's the opposite of what they were told to believe yesterday, it won't matter. If need be, tomorrow Trey Gowdy will be a traitor. I don't know, something happened to him since the Hillary thing. I don't know. They'll square that circle somehow, I think. I hope he's right and I'm wrong. But maybe it will be a big deal. Maybe at some point it shows that the Republicans are going to have to be peeled away from this blind support for everything Trump does. For this rushed banana republic.
I doubt it's going to have any impact in anything that has to do with this investigation, Trey Gowdy coming out. But it's really hard to paint Trey Gowdy as a liberal or a Democrat because he was the head witch hunter in the Benghazi trials.
And yet Rosenstein, who was appointed by Trump, is like an Obama guy. Jeff Sessions, who was appointed by Trump, who was like the first moron in the country to support Trump, I think they'll manage.
Even Clapper, who came out, who served under every president from JFK through Obama, who pretty much verifies that all the evidence that they've got.
JFK and Obama, you've made your own case for the Fox News people. JFK and Obama, he's too soiled. Comey, he worked for a Democrat once, he's soiled.
Every president from
It's nice that
JFK.
you're already coming around to my way of thinking on that one, by the way. What are you, Trump? Anyway, I'm reminded, the government is attacking the government about the government investigating crimes. And this would seem like this is unprecedented. This is insane. This is nuts. Except I'm reminded, because the part I was just talking about this in class the other day, of when this happened, I believe for the first time in history, under George W. Bush, where the United States government sued the United States government, where our government rose up against itself. Civil War doesn't count because it wasn't in our government, it was some of the states that ran away. And that was when the Bush administration came out with its energy policy, which was a giveaway to oil companies, and scoffed at conservation. And to defend this ridiculous policy, the Vice President's office said, well, this was the recommendation of the Energy Task Force. To which thinking, intelligent people, i.e. people on the left, said, really? This stupid policy was the recommendation of the Energy Task Force? Who is this Energy Task Force? At which point, look this up, I'm not making any of this up, the Vice President said, I will not tell you. I won't tell you who's on the task force coming up with stupid policies which we're going to rely on to be U.S. energy policy. That led the government, at the time, the General Accounting Office, to sue the Vice President's office to compel the disclosure of the names of the Energy Task Force that was making U.S. energy policy. And our esteemed United States Supreme Court, yes, those they want to make sure to keep running the same fashion protecting Republicans, dismissed the case, ruled in favor of the Vice President's office, not on the merits, but because they held that the only entity that had standing, that had the right to sue the Vice Presidents to compel the disclosure of the names of the people making U.S. energy policy was, drumroll please, the Vice President's office. So the Vice President's office could have sued itself. And here we are again. The next Republican presidency, the next government turning inwards on itself. Anyway, the talk of the town right now in America, all the rage, all the discussions, is can the president be indicted? How can he be gotten out of office? We've almost moved beyond the, gee, what are they going to find? Because it's so obvious that they're finding crimes. And now the question is, if Mueller comes out and recommends, at least, the indictment of the President of the United States on several counts, will any Republican give a shit? How nice. Anyway, the second part of Russian roulette, Swamp Edition. We reported weeks ago, I think months ago, on this show about Purdue Pharmaceutical and its role in creating the opioid crisis. This is what happens when you read liberal media. I think that one was a long article in the New Yorker magazine, though I may have gotten that one wrong. I'd go back and look for our show. Because it turns out this week, the Department of Justice issued a report on Purdue Pharmaceutical that said everything we reported on months ago. And in fact, prosecutors recommended felony indictment versus 3 executives of the company. It turns out that Department of Justice officials, top Department of Justice officials under then President W, said no, squelched the prosecutions. I mean, they just lied about the risk of addiction and abuse. They knew that the drugs, opioids, were being abused. They knew that they were killing. It turns out now hundreds of thousands of Americans. Hundreds of thousands of Americans. And they knew it. And they knew they were being abused. And they were lying about it. And they were profiting from it. But rich people don't go to prison. Rich people don't pay for their crimes. This is America. They're white people. The Sacklers, they're philanthropists. They give to charitable causes, including politicians. When we talk about responsibility, as we've talked about for a while, and eventually at some point have the time to come back and devote a show to, responsibility is for poor people. Personal responsibility is for kids on food stamps. It's for immigrants who come to America to try to make a life for themselves. They need to have personal responsibility, not white people. Give me a break. Lastly, in Swamp Watch, we've reported a lot on Scott Pruitt at the EPA. I don't mean to make too much of Scott Pruitt. He is representative of what exists throughout the Trump government. But there have been 2 articles in 2 of the great liberal so-called magazines. Mother Jones, an article by Rebecca Lieber, and Margaret Talbot has an article in the New Yorker magazine on Scott Pruitt and his reign at the EPA. In the last few minutes we have, just quickly, a few filling in the blanks on Scott Pruitt, who we've talked about before. A man with high aspirations to, for instance, become President of the United States. On his way there, he clearly wanted to be our nation's Attorney General. And he's just the kind of guy that Trump would want as Attorney General, because he apparently has no values, no core beliefs, no fixed anything that money can't buy. He's a man whose political aspirations were fueled by oil company money, fossil fuel company money, and who immediately changed whatever he believed in order to accommodate whoever was giving him the money. Since he's been the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, he's apparently conducted, well, since in 2017, rather, according to Media Matters, he gave 15 interviews to Fox News, 13 to conservative radio, 7 to Fox Business, and 8 to all other media entities combined. Why does he not want to publicize what he's doing? Well, we have reports on his meetings. Turns out, since he's been there, he's had 218 meetings, according to the Washington Post. 218 meetings with industry representatives, lobbyists, and other scumbags. With environmental and public health people, 12. 218 to 12. Oh, I'm sure we're getting good policies. He's backed by energy companies and basically signing their public relations into law and into policy for the EPA. He won't release his emails. He used a private email server. Remember when that was a thing? When the bitch was doing it? Yeah, not so much anymore. He's hollowed out our science advisory boards, filled them with industry representatives, not scientists. In his first year alone, he proposed repealing or delaying more than 30 significant environmental rules to protect public health and our children, including on ridiculously dirty trucks called glider trucks that are, it's estimated, his own agency has estimated that their pollution alone causes up to 1,600 premature deaths a year. That's 1,600. Oh, whatever. He is engaged in a policy of stall, 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 so that the fossil fuel companies can get everything out of the ground that's worth getting before it's too late. They have reduced EPA staffing to Reagan levels, which are the lowest we've seen. He is at war with his own career staff, people who actually believe in the mission of the Environmental Protection Agency. Suddenly, his secure phone booth for $40-something thousand for his office makes a little bit more sense, because everything he does has to be kept secret from his own staff. Trump proposed a 31% cut in the budget. Republicans in the House reduced that cut to 6.5%. But it's important to point out, as these articles did, that it had already been reduced to the lowest amount of funding since 1986, despite having many more responsibilities and a much larger economy. So we are cutting 6.5% from the lowest we've seen in almost all of our listeners' lifetimes. He doesn't believe in transparency. He is against his own agency's practice and refused to release his meeting schedule, which we can understand, or after the fact, his calendar of who he actually met with. He threw a reporter out of a so-called public meeting on water contamination, presumably for doing the unpardonable of wanting to ask a question. But I guess it's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. You want jobs? Maybe we should bring back lead. Think of all the jobs that would create in the healthcare industry, treating all the children with lead problems, and in special education teaching. What a great way to get more jobs. Let's require oil spill. I know what you think is special education teaching. Remember, we're also killing public education too, so that's a win-win on that side. Pruitt and DeBoss work together. So we could stunt these kids' intellectual development and then, tell them to pay for their own damn education. Maybe we should require oil spills so we create whole new industries in bird cleaning. This is where we're going in this country. Why does this matter? It's not just that Pruitt is a scumbag who probably still hopes to be president of the United States. It's not just that he is destroying the environment that we all need to live happy and healthy and productive lives, including our children. He is emblematic of swamp draining, Trump style, because he is emblematic of what our government has become. Wealthy, corrupt scumbags stealing everything they can before, hopefully, we vote these sons of bitches back to where they are, or should be, and then maybe to prison in 2018. Well, that's some of this week's news. That's today's show. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If you're a regular listener, I hope you've already subscribed to our YouTube channel. I've been asking you this every week. Why haven't you done it? If you haven't done it, ask your kids. They'll show you how to do it. First, you create an account, then you subscribe to us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page. You can do it in Russian. Follow us on Twitter and all our other social media. Please listen to us on Podbean or on iTunes. Like Looking Forward. Please stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Forward Nation Radio with David Leventhal.